So it's been a very busy week. We learned that Oleksandr Svatak, new Ukrainian center back from Dnipro or Dnipropetrovsk, but I think it is just Dnipro,
Snipro.
doing some research. I'm sorry, what?
Snipro, I think, is the exact right pronunciation, but literally no one in the
Ooh,
United States, unless you did like Cold War studies and took not enough Russian to actually get proficient in the Russian language like I did, would have any idea.
that was very James Bond villain of you there.
Yes, Mr. West, I want you to report the facts.
All right. So he is from this city in Ukraine. He represented their team. He was the captain there. He was playing in the Euros. He did a good job locking down Romelu Lukaku in the Ukraine game against Belgium, but Ukraine is now out of the tournament, and Spartak is presumably at this point free to come to Austin. In the meantime, Osman Bukari came to town. Was We found out Monday afternoon that he was indeed in Austin or en route to Austin, and there was going to be a party for him on Tuesday at the Continental Club, the South Congress nightclub, the Venerable. And by venerable, we mean kind of old, kind of small, kind of dark, kind of cacophonous when you put people in there. He got driven up to the front door by Steve Wertheimer, who is the owner of the Continental Club, and then came in. Some songs were played for him, and then he was ushered over to a kind of makeshift press conference area where there was a lot of noise still in the background. And in order to be heard, we had to get very, very close to him with microphones and phones, basically almost touching him. So we'll get into a little bit of thoughts about Wolff and Bukari later and kind of their first days and all that. But just hang on to this little bit of it. So this is not where I wanted to go necessarily. We'll get to that part about, just kind of Bukari and his reception a little bit later. But what we're kind of wanting to talk about here is Austin's propensity for using nightclubs for these kind of ceremonies, right? So when Josh Wolff was first introduced back in 2019, they also used the Continental Club. It was also summer. I remember another hot walk from my car to the club. And again, nightclubs better at night than in the day. This Wolff one, I think, was at 11 in the morning, I want to say. The Bukari one was at 4 in the afternoon. Obviously, most recently with the MLS All-Star game, we went to Antone's, the New Jack East fifth version of Antone's. It's a pretty good club at night, but maybe less so in the day. So we know that Austin though likes using nightclubs for these events, and they're going to probably continue to use them. So Zvatok, while not a designated player, still a pretty solid starter. He might need a place to have a welcome party, right? So Ukraine is out of the tournament. Jamaica, the spiritual home of reggae and then ska kind of deriving from there and all that, is also out of the tournament, their tournament, Copa America, in part because Ecuador beat Jamaica, but also because Venezuela beat Mexico. Are you following so far, Moses?
I am.
Okay, good. So hear me out. So Jamaica and Ukraine all of a sudden have these things in common. We need a downtown nightclub to welcome Svatak.
Hmm.
Since 1991, the Flamingo Cantina has been known as the people's favorite venue in Austin, Texas, to see what we call good vibes music. Live reggae, ska, Latin, and world beat music, as well as rock, hip hop, alternative, and more. This is from the website, of course. Many artists who perform at the Flamingo Cantina enjoy the intimate nature of the room and comment on the good vibe, the feel from the audience. The shows at our venue are unlike any other. The artists themselves will tell you that they keep returning to get more of that vibe of the people in the place. So, what do we think?
I mean, we're Vibes FC people who follow
We
Austin,
are.
so I feel like that's the most natural possible solution. I think you cracked it. I think you didn't even have to find a confidential source to get them to leak it. You just did the gumshoe reporting. You solved the case, Detective
I'm
West.
just putting ideas out in the world, really. If it so happens that next Monday you get an alert that Fat Talk is waiting at the Flamingo Cantina for you, you find parking on 6th somewhere, and then you make your way into, again, a club that looks better, about 10 p.m., 11 p.m., midnight, those hours rather than which will probably be like what 2:30, 3 o'clock, somewhere in there.
Yeah.
And you see your new Ukrainian center back amidst a perhaps incongruous, but no more incongruous setting really than having Bukari from Ghana amidst American classic cars and a lot of kind of noise and revelry in a place that is kind of better known for Barfield the Tyrant than for welcoming a new soccer star to his home city. I'm just curious as to what Bukari made of all this. So I know that you were watching carefully, you were taking a bunch of photos. What do you think his read on the whole event was?
I mean, I don't know how. Maybe intentionally they didn't actually prep him that well for what he was walking into, and
It's
they
probably
were
better,
more.
right?
Yeah, I mean, they were more concerned with getting the physical done and introducing him around in the mess hall. He seemed tentative, a little taken aback, a little overwhelmed, a little. Okay, so what's happening now? Okay, so now I'm being ushered over to the drum circle, and okay, all right, I guess we're doing this. Oh, here's a scarf. Oh, here's another scarf. Oh, and now a third scarf. I have many scarves now. Huh, okay, all right. And and okay, and they're still playing, and all right. This is this is not what I'm used to at Red Star. Lovely fans, but this is interesting. Huh. Okay. All right. Are we done now? Are we done now? No. Oh,
No, we're
okay.
gonna we're gonna
No.
move you over here now to these journalists. You may have heard that Americans like a fair modicum of personal space. We're about to confuse you further with all these journalists all of a sudden standing 4 inches away from you and
Uh-huh.
pushing microphones and phones in your face uncomfortably closer out of the sheer want to hear and be heard.
And man, I was in the scrum and I could barely hear anything that anyone was saying. Not just him, but people asking questions. I mean, I had my phone shoved in there to try to get something. I still haven't bothered listening to it because the club's microphone was definitely set up better than, the microphone on my iPhone. But yeah, it was to say that it was a less than ideal environment for that kind of thing, would be putting it incredibly mildly.
And
But
then
maybe that was by design.
And then, after all of that has happened and he's whisked away, they take him a little bit further up the road on South Congress and they make him do one of those touristy kind of photos where he's standing in the middle of the street with the Capitol and all that in the background. And at some point he must be wondering, am I being pranked?
I liked that when he took the stage, he introduced himself by saying his name, pronouncing his name,
Mhm.
because a lot of people have a lot of assumptions about how different players' names are said, and I like to think that I'm part of pronunciation FC because I had it right. It's Usman Bukari, emphasis on the first syllable of his last name.
So
Um,
we've been saying it wrong the whole time.
Everybody's been saying it wrong. I didn't want to correct people. It's not a good look. But now he's said it. He's gone on the record. So now he's correcting people. I'm not being the pedant. The player is. And it's his name, so he can do what he wants with it. Yeah, it was very, hi, my name is Usman. I'm new to this school. You all seem very nice. Let's play kickball at recess. It was very polite, very upstanding. The thing I had in my back pocket, metaphorically, was that as they were whisking him around to and fro, I greeted him with the traditional greeting in Twi, the tribal language that most of Ghana speaks. But as with anything in another language, there are other connotations about familial community sort of things that latch onto that. And I got a big old cheese out of him for that because he looked like he was very much swimming in the deep end and just kind of overwhelmed by all of it. And it seemed that little touch was something that he appreciated while in full sensory overload mode. And yeah, seems like a really nice guy. I look forward to the first press conference availability that we get with him, where he Hutter O'Brien's us and talks about wanting to give it 110% and just is really glad the whole team showed up and blah 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 blah.
And where we can ask him what his favorite Metallica song is.
Yeah, exactly. His
Right.
his
So
favorite
there's
Metallica
only
song is That Shirt.
that shirt. Exactly.
Emergency podcast. Betty did a thing, so we gotta talk about it. Emergency podcast. It's an emergency. Emergency podcast. Shut up, oh yeah, shut up, oh yeah, shut up. Emergency podcast. It's an emergency.
Hey, a hearty hello to you all, and welcome to Emergency Podcast, the podcast where we deal with all the Austin FC emergencies. And this week, there's an abundance of good Austin FC emergencies, as in, oh, we got a full roster all of a sudden, and we got to figure out what's happening with Musa Jite in 4 days. And then also, of course, we have game-related emergencies, which is, oh, looks like we're not going to have Danny Pereira for a while because Venezuela's doing a lot better in this tournament than we thought they maybe were going to. So let's dive in. With me, of course, is Moisés Chiullán. Moisés, how you doing today?
Doing great. I'm vibing off of the energy reverberating off of the Continental Club walls. Still,
lots reverberating off the Continental Club walls, as my eardrums can attest. Wow, that was some event. We'll get into Wolff and Bukari a little bit more. I guess Bukari is how we pronounce it now. And what is that tweet reading again?
Aquaba, AKWAABA, Aquaba.
Beautiful. All right, so everybody's got a new variant on Verde and Listos now for how we greet each other in the streets. And yeah, let's dive right into it. So before we get into Bukari and a little bit of that news, I want to get into the most recent stuff of Alexander Svatov, center back. Do we need a center back? We have one now, and we got some interesting stuff actually. So we had the press conference with Bukari and then with Rodo on Tuesday, and then after the press conference was over, we got kind of the inner circle, smoking jackets, men at the sauna, whatever you want to use as your mental image. Where
the back room at Rodo's preferred cigar shop out by the lake where he presumably lives.
Yeah. So anyway, so he kind of shared some interesting stuff, and then we also kind of got some interesting stuff filtered through. So let's get into some Svatok stuff a little bit here first, and then we're gonna get into more about Bukari and Dessler and kind of the business that Rodo's been doing this summer. So Ezra Sarens brought this up in one of the various sundry chats that I belong to. And this was something that Rodo had just kind of talked about in the press conference when we were asking about Svatok and kind of why he came over. And he had talked about this was something in the works since last November, and there was an on again, off again quality to it. Ezra did a little digging and found out that FIFA had sanctioned SC Dnipro 1, however you pronounce it, with the transfer ban in last year's winter window due to failing to pay a former coach. And then there were also some players apparently that were not getting paid. And I've got this pulled up. This was an article from, and now I have it in the original Ukrainian, which is not going to be helpful. Hello, Google Translate. From December 20th, 2023, apparently there was a coach from Croatia, Ihor Jovicevic, who needed to be paid. And then also apparently some players were not paid, and they had promised all debts to football players and coaches will be repaid from this. But apparently maybe part of the reason that this didn't happen in the winter window and why Heinz Eich came to the team was because of this FIFA ban. If you kind of pull together, all the kind of moving parts, that is kind of what's happened in the timeline, which I thought was pretty interesting. And then again, I mean, obviously, there are some extreme challenges of playing soccer in Ukraine right now, given the situation, but also maybe part of what was motivating Svatok to leave his home city, to leave his captaincy, is maybe getting paid regularly and having the reassurance that you can do that.
Yeah, I think that the Roto line of no panic signings, but hey, when you need to fill in that position, what do? Okay, well, let's fill it in with something that is either a long-term plan that is good depth overall if we end up getting the ideal player that we were going for in the first place. To me, it shows a lot of pragmatism.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, and again, I mean, the Heinz Eich signing was basically something that happened late in the transfer window, as we all know by now.
He came late
so
to camp, Phil. He came late to camp.
We know that. But I think part of that is, okay, we need to have another center back in. This one's not going to come through in the winter. FIFA and what they've done is kind of messing with our plans. So let's find somebody who's available, somebody who's good, somebody who does indeed have some European experience, because Heinzike has that. So if we are moving on that kind of template and trying to get a more Europe heavy roster in terms of experience, in terms of playing and being tested in that arena, then Heinzike is certainly that. Of course, now, that's going to be 5 center backs. Some teams do have that, but Mike Rignola did a little bit of a deep dive on that and provided some receipts for a bunch of us, and that was appreciated. I do think, though, again, there's the speculation, Matt Hedges, does Cincinnati need him? Does Miami need him? I know that Zach, in the most recent North End podcast, in addition to trying to pronounce Svatak's home city, which is a linguistic journey that you should indulge yourself on, he was also kind of speculating that, and they were drooling over the prospects of, can we move Hedges and some Gam over for much needed attacker in the form of Leo Campana, which would be a lot of fun. I think Hedges
everybody is real obsessed with this Leo Campana thing. They just want to make Leo Campana happen, like people want to make fetch happen. Some would say. I find it a great exercise of keep wanting Leo Campana, because that would be amazing. That'd be hilarious. Aside from people wanting it, I don't know that I've seen the evidence that it's in the cards necessarily.
I think it'd be fun. I think
it would be
move.
fun. Will not deny it would absolutely be fun.
Yeah. But what's probably more likely is Hedges and some Gam to move him to FC Cincinnati, which is in desperate need of center backs right now. Like, he would plug in there. I think he would fit in great at Cincinnati, and that would be, he'd reunite. Well, did he? Yeah, I guess he did overlap with Kip Keller a little bit. So he would reunite with Kip Keller. And then obviously it's a chance to go out winning an MLS Cup. Cincinnati obviously is still a chance to do that. Although losing 2 key center backs, one for a couple of months, one for the whole damn rest of the season.
Yeah, he can fill in
Miazga. That was
making some extra money delivering those pizzas that Miazga can't now.
Right. So, but seriously though, I mean, I think it makes a lot of sense on both sides. It would open up a senior roster spot and would allow a little bit more flexibility for Roto to bring in another player in this window, or at least it would be the necessary move to fit GT back in if he comes in. I don't think he's coming back in, but again, they've got to figure out someplace to move him before the loan expires on the 30th, or they're technically not going to be in roster compliance.
So the question is there already a plan in place? Or is he going to come back and put them out of compliance? But technically, the guys that are coming in the summer window have not officially come in until, what, July 18th? Right.
They do have a little bit of a buffer, I think. I think it's the way that works. But yeah, it's going to be a real interesting couple of weeks here, I think, as we try to determine what indeed will happen with that. Again, Josh said that he did miss Musa, but maybe not in the way of, oh, you're gonna not be able to get one of these 3 summer transfer signings in if we can't find a place for him to be that is not Austin. So we'll see what happens there. Going to be interesting. So with Bukari then, and him coming to Austin, you were at the press conference on Thursday, and I just want to call attention to a quote that Wolff had about his first interaction with the new designated player. He said, the first interaction was good. He was shy on the first day. It's a lot to take in, as it always is. New faces in a new space. It's opening up to that, and obviously the people being open to him. So it's gotten better each day. He's in here with these guys, so that becomes a little bit more comfortable. And so on the first day, when somebody's shy and there's a lot to take in, I think what you want to do is assault their senses by bringing them to a nightclub at 4 p.m.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good stress test. Like, how is this guy going to deal with MLS grade competition? This guy who's played in Champions League and on the world stage and swiped the celly from fake Ronaldo, Fonaldo, as I like to call him. Only thing I like to call him. Gosh, how is this guy going to handle the stress? Let's stress test him right up front.
What is CONCACAF in venue form?
Exactly.
A nightclub at 4 p.m.
Yeah. Welcome to CONCACAF, kid. I hope you survived the experience, to quote the X-Men. Yeah, that's a hell of a first. We got establishment of whether Wolff came up with it or whether it is a nickname that, he was asked, hey, what do people call you for short? What do you want us to call you, Usman? What do you want us to call you? Wolff called him Buka. I'm sure that people will make really lazy wordplay jokes of, oh, Buca de Beppo. Sorry, that's Italian. Wrong language, guys. Nice try. But the thing I like about this, whether it is a Wolff attached moniker, and I mean this will be the speculation of the next, I don't know, 7 days. It'll be what we go through this news cycle, and either we'll get an answer or we won't get an answer. Or something actually interesting will happen. More Seattle Sounders will beat the crap out of each other or something. Who knows? But at the very least, this nickname does work as a pronunciation guide for folks on how to actually pronounce his last name. So I am tentatively positive on this as a good thing, even if it is just something that Josh dreamed up because he thought he would like it, like him calling Valencia JoJo, which seems weird, and I can't imagine that Johan actually likes that. But I don't know.
Yeah.
This whole team is a black box. We only have so much insight into all this crap. So maybe Valencia really does like being called JoJo. Who knows? But
I am 99 point something confident that Buka is Wolff coined.
Okay, we'll see. I mean, look,
Yeah.
as you know, I'm not big into the sports betting thing or fantasy or anything like that. But this might be something. This might be something. I could lay some friendly jellyfish wagers on. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know what side I'm necessarily going to come down on. I'm kind of 50-50. It's a toss up to me. So that's going to be the big thing that I'm going to make my entire personality for the next 7 days is trying to find out an answer to that.
Yeah, I don't think this is going to be anything that insert betting sponsor for emergency podcast here would be placing any lines on necessarily, but I do have a feeling that this is Wolff is trying to make his new Ghanaian star comfortable by affixing a nickname to him that may or may not necessarily work, but like JoJo will stick with him for throughout his tenure at the club.
We'll go with it for as long as Joshy keeps using it.
Mm-hmm. As we do, right? So we do call Hodder Obrian Obi in our day-to-day conversations now, do we not?
Yeah, I mean that's what Diego Rubio calls him. So if a player mentions it, then I have more confidence that it's more than Josh, pulling out a hat and going, all right, which nickname will I give ye, my new player? If they gave us a little more color on this kind of stuff, we wouldn't have this kind of dumb speculation. I'm just saying, open up the doors a little bit, let us in, let us know some of the dumb, irrelevant, trivial secrets, and we'll get the word out there that this isn't Josh Wolff renaming players willy-nilly, much to their chagrin.
Or him and his like sauna cigar room kind of scenario, or a pickleball court.
Phil, I have trouble
with Davy Arnaud.
I have trouble. Yeah, Davy Arnaud, I can see in a sauna, in a cigar room. Josh Wolff, I see having a nice crisp Arnold Palmer on a deck somewhere. I cannot picture Josh holding court in a sauna or with a Romeo and Julieta curled in his index finger. I don't see those kinds of things. But Davy Arnaud, however, I could see some mob boss holding court kind of thing.
But I wanted to get the two of them together so Josh could say to Davy, first rule of coaching, nicknames, and then Davy could just kind of sagely nod back to him, and they could be satisfied in their knowledge that that's really what it takes.
This is the way.
Enough players, enough nicknames, and you have team cohesion.
Exactly.
So speaking of team cohesion, let's talk a little bit about the upcoming SKC match that's going to be happening. And again, this is on Saturday. Sporting Kansas City is 1-11-2 in their last 14 matches. Fans are not happy. Their technical director / kind of player personnel head, Brian Blisk, was let go by the club a couple of days ago as a sort of fall guy. And things are not happy. Kevin Lopez, who does really great content over in Kansas City, you might know him from some of his animated watch-alongs that he's done on YouTube, and he's been doing some other content since then. He is now referring to Peter Vermes, who has been coached since 2009, as the dictator. So that's as in we need to get rid of the dictator before we can do anything else. So there's not a lot of good feelings there. But Wolff today, I thought it was interesting, and maybe you can kind of share a little bit of this from the press conference where basically he said, "Yep, Vermes is a zombie, and you can't ever really count on him being dead and gone or his team. That as long as Vermes is allowed to." Come to matches and stand on the sideline, that the team will continue to perform and respond, and he will be their coach when it is just him coaching 11 cockroaches once the apocalypse happens and most every human is gone and it's just cockroach soccer. Vermes will somehow still be there.
I mean, as you put in today's newsletter drop, Josh played for him on the Wiz.
Yeah.
Former wizard Josh Wolff, retired wizard, previous sorcerer. He has been there. He, I think, has a good read on him as a coach.
Now a different wizard, a wizard of nicknames.
Exactly. Something that I've gotten used to in these press conferences is I like to give them a little bit more in terms of words than they absolutely need, so that I can try to get Josh in particular off of him going, this will be pre-packaged answer number 17B that I will give when being asked about an opposing coach, with the additional flavor of Vermes. So it'll be answer 17B dash. I can see him going through the file cards in his mind of, here is the wrapped in plastic thing from the supermarket I'm going to heat up and serve over here. With Vermes, I assumed we were going to get something that was just about how you never count this guy or his team out. Regardless of how the result goes, the fan base will find some way to interpret as, well, obviously Josh went in soft against his old coach, or, well, obviously Josh was overestimating a total turkey who should be thrown out of his job. And of course, Austin beat them 4-0 because they were a joke, and Josh should have thought that they were. Yeah, literally nothing surprising to me in that answer about Vermes. And to Kevin Show, the legendary, who I like jabbing back and forth with on Twitter, one of the few things I still like about Twitter. Vermes will go when the regime goes, like when the ownership at Kansas City sells the team, or when he just decides that he doesn't want it anymore and wants to go somewhere else. When Berhalter finally screws up enough that U.S. Soccer tosses him out of there, if for some reason that position would appeal to Vermes over staying at Kansas City in a place where he really is, the installed dictator of preference by the ruling class, I don't see him going anywhere. People keep talking about, Vermes watch. He's on the hot seat. You know what? He'll be on. If it gives the king pleasure to be on the hot seat, that's when he'll be on the hot seat. Should he be? Sure. Absolutely. Should Wolff? Sure. Yes, absolutely. From objective, if you want to call something that I think in a lot of people's minds they say is objective, but is more subjective to how they feel every coach should be measured by a specific line rather than it necessarily actually carrying sway in MLS, as we've seen, where coach after coach after coach has bizarrely survived longer at various clubs than people have assumed they would. Like, the rules of European football are not the same in this league. So yeah, all that is to say, I look forward to the narrative of the week continuing to be, why does Peter Vermes have a job, when there's just not going to be an answer to that. And the much more interesting answer to me is, how does that team, very much in their head about being on a terrible run of form and coming away from a really rough road loss, goes up against a team that continues to be doubted, continues to be underestimated by various sides. Vermes is inclusive back in that May home match on the 18th, who are finding their footing. And as many narratives as people have wanted to spin up or wanted to believe into existence, the impression I get from these players, and they are not many of them very good actors, as you can tell from the way that they take dives. These players want to win. These players want this team to turn around. They want to prove themselves. In some cases, like Matt Hedges, who you mentioned, other players, Diego Rubio, Brendan Hines-Ike, who've come from other clubs, who have something to prove, who, whether they're in the twilight of their careers or just in this phase of their careers where they are trying to stay on a salary level that they and their partner and their million kids are comfortable with, there are a lot of guys on this team who have something to prove, and not just the ones who got national team call-ups and who are out at the moment. To me, the story of the weekend is what does this team go and take on the road? And I mean, what second team call-up surprises might we be in store for? Like, do we see Micah Burton take the field for the first team for the first time this weekend? That stuff is a lot more interesting to me.
Yeah. I mean, I do want to dive into the Vermes thing a little bit, just because, I mean, he is kind of the dean of MLS coaches, right? So, and just thinking about how many like 3-year cycles of disappointment and burn bridges that Jose Mourinho has had in the time that Vermes has been consistently coaching at SKC. I mean, it's been at least 2 or 3, right? So, I mean, Wolff's quote on this was specifically, we heard this story before from Kansas City. We've seen this story before, and they can rip out 10 wins. They did it last year, referring to the end of last season. But certainly Wolff is paying attention. This next part of it is, so regardless of what they've done at this point, regardless of playing in a back five and losing on the road 4-0, which is kind of a sick burn reflection of what happened with SKC against Columbus recently, where Cucho got a hat trick. Peter Vermes is one of the most successful coaches in our league. He goes on to say it's because he remains resolute and calm, and he gets the best out of players. So I expect them to be at home with an added edge, a real bite. They know the season is only 34 games, and at home it's important, so it's going to be a difficult match regardless. So I kind of think in a way that Wolff sees a lot of himself and his kind of not too high, not too low kind of energy. I think he's learned some things for Vermes in that. I think that kind of ability to stay on forever as a head coach. Like if you're a Wolff outer right now and you are seeing kind of Wolff having Vermes as this mentor / model / yeah, this is a guy that does it right, then I think that you begin to see this idea that maybe Wolff thinks that with the right bit of pragmatism, he can stay around a while.
Yeah, I think so too. And I knew that this was something that you wanted to dig into. And that's why I wanted to kind of dig into kind of the outer atmosphere of this. Because at the heart of it, like, there is an interesting narrative duality beyond the Wolff should be gone, Vermes should be gone. Wouldn't it be great if both of these coaches get fired after this weekend? That's a fascinating dreamland that would be very entertaining and would be very interesting to report on. Sure, but to me, it's in the same zone of speculation as, Leo Campana obviously coming to Austin. Well, obviously, I don't know about that. Would it be interesting? Absolutely. But the thing that, and I'm gonna get on the wrong side of certain people saying this. One of the things that I think is interesting about Wolff, and that I have grown to appreciate about him, pulling out the file cards and thumbing through them for canned answer 17B-PV and so on and so forth, is that there's a great deal of awareness and deeply felt knowledge that Josh has about this league. Not just the people like Vermes that he's played for or people that he's played with. He is an MLS sicko who people look at his win-loss ratio, and that is a very important thing to judge him on. But I think it is interesting, the little things around the edges that he lets us see. And to your point, I think a big piece of it is, look, this is a tough league. The travel is brutal. Messi was warned about it, but didn't. There's the MLS required mention of Messi during the episode for those keeping track. He wasn't ready for just how completely insane their schedule is, not even counting Leagues Cup, not even counting overlapping international competitions and that kind of thing.
By the way, you have to travel to Vancouver. Well, I'm not doing that.
Well, I'm not, on turf, tell me when they put in grass. Refund everybody's tickets now. I'm not going. I think it is interesting seeing things that aren't Josh being part of the Good Old Boys network or something like that and getting the back of his old boss. But honestly, like, analytically, it's like Peter is a story within MLS that people don't see the forest for the trees, to use a metaphor. They look at the current run of form. They look at what people think the standard for whether a coach stays or goes is. But Kansas cockroaches after the nuclear winter. Yeah, he's going to be around, not because he knows, I mean, he certainly knows where some bodies are buried, I bet, but it's because he has figured out this league, what this league is, and how to continue to survive.
Yes and no. I mean, I think in terms of tactically, I think in terms of just being this kind of solid as a rock sort of managerial presence, I think he's been that. But the kind of adherence to the 4-3-3 and then kind of experimenting with the
Yeah.
back five this last time out. I know that Nate, one of the Apple TV folks, got into that with Moon Tower last week, just kind of talking about some of their issues there. And just, again, you've got kind of an aging roster. You've had some kind of weird kind of choices in terms of some of the players that they've gotten. I mean, some of their DPs have worked out, some have not necessarily. They made this really bizarre bid for Cristiano Ronaldo, which would have been just absolutely funny to see him in Sporting Kansas City, and more specifically in Kansas City, Missouri, and for game days, Kansas City, Kansas, which I think we have mentioned before. I think that we have talked about that as a source of great mirth for us. But I do wonder again if they are going to have a chance. Maybe he'll get some help to remake the roster. I know this move with Bliss is in part so he doesn't have to necessarily do double duty with both coaching and sporting directing, as we know is a terrible thing to do and a terrible thing to be. Witness 2023 Josh Wolff having to pick up the pieces for Claudio Reyna to kind of witness the challenges therein, right? So as Austin fans, you should feel much better having a solid sporting director alongside the coach, no matter what you think of the coach. But again, yeah, I do think that this is going to be an interesting inflection point, right? So, I mean, obviously, SKC survived one season of kind of extreme hardship last year because they had this kind of incredible run at the end, this kind of grit and hustle and verve kind of last stretch of the season, which got them into the playoffs. Not a great playoff spot, but getting into the playoffs, as we know, it's an important thing. It's a good thing. It's what a lot of teams are measured by, what a lot of coaches are measured by. But again, I just am curious to see how this might shake out, and if Vermes is going to be able to deal with a second straight season of this. I don't know that he'll be fired necessarily, but you might see something like what happened at RSL last year, where Mastroeni, he basically was kind of relieved of his assistant coaches. Ownership kind of stepped in and did some more stuff, but they also got him Chicho Arango, and that certainly helps things. So just kind of curious about that.
And certainly, like, I think they're both Vermes and Wolff, eyes are on them. And with Wolff, it's like as many things as enrage the fan base. Getting into the playoffs is the bar, and especially with these new signings coming in, I feel like, as frustrating as it may be for folks who want him gone at all costs, I don't know that they are going to get the run of form in the second half of the season that is going to necessarily do that, unless the team is just massively racked by injuries, or other teams really have some massive comeback, like the Sounders. That kind of conflict in their locker room, that is absolute shambles down for them. But then to Vermes, similarly, there are going to be expectations. It'll be interesting to see how both of these clubs go from here into the maw of Leagues Cup. And as you and I have become very fond of saying, Austin stands absolutely no chance of making it out of the group stage against Pumas and Monterrey. What if they do? What if they do? And is that something that the club, the players, these fans, is it something that they actually want, is to suddenly go deep on a Leagues Cup run in a time when, I mean, people are speculating that there's no way that Messi is going to come out of Copa America and jump right into Leagues Cup. But I don't know. What if he does? If he doesn't, what is the face of the overall competition look like, with very much, or he shows up late in Miami's run in that competition? There are a lot of question marks, especially going into an international transfer window, that I don't know. It is easy to fall in those standby. Well, obviously, Vermes and Wolff are in trouble. Well, a lot of stuff can change in 4 weeks. A lot, especially in this league.
So we're predicting an Austin, Kansas City Leagues Cup final.
That'd be hilarious. It'd be real funny. I don't know. And yeah, before people write in, I don't even know if that's possible, but now I want that. I think that'd be hilarious.
So I know that you put together some charts and tables on
Oh, so
second
many,
team
so
possibilities
many.
for call-ups. Obviously, Alonso Ramirez, he had his 2 appearances, looked real good against Minnesota. Really like what we saw.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, as we talked about on the last episode, complications, a complicated guy who can't probably really get signed to a supplemental roster spot, though we'll see what kind of magic can be conjured up in the next couple of weeks here. But in the meantime, we do have some players who could possibly come on board. And I know that there's also a Scared Money Derby that I think is
Mm-hmm.
in concert with this game this weekend. So let's talk about that and what might happen. Because I know that you had asked Wolff about the possibility of call ups, and he had a pretty priceless answer.
There was a pause, and
Mhm.
then he grinned and said, potentially.
Yeah.
And staying on Alonso for a second, what if they figured out that supplementary roster slot thing and just went ahead and did it? And he's
Mhm.
on the supplemental roster as of this weekend. And we assume, well, he got his 2 call ups. Well, if he's on the senior roster, then they can play him whenever they want him. My thinking is that that's not outside the realm of possibility because
Mhm.
Wolff is so conservative about this. Well, these boys have to earn it and they got to get out there and give it 110% and rub it in the dirt and get back up and really give it the what for. Because looking at the various options, because where they are thinnest is in the midfield, they need somebody, even if just on the bench, even if just as a sub. And of the people that he has specifically mentioned of late,
Mhm.
Irvin Torres has been training with
Yep.
the first team. He's a kid. He's one of the younger kids of the kids on Austin FC too, but he's incredibly cool headed.
Mhm.
Talking to Brett Utley after one of their most recent games, um, he had really positive things to say about both Alonso and Irvin that made me think that there's serious first team eyes on both of those guys, even though
Mhm.
Irvin is so young, because
Right.
he is he in watching him in those second team games, he has been unflappable. He has been one of the
Mhm.
steadiest players that they have had to work with. So, I mean, is it possible that since both teams are in Kansas City anyway, the second team on
Mhm.
Sunday playing, is there a possibility that they temporary agreement Irvin Torres? Maybe, but that would have me wondering, why not just bring in Micah Burton? But Mike has been kind of getting run over by, third division players in Next Pro.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
and if Josh is not specifically mentioning Micah, if he's not specifically mentioning a player's name, even though I think there are some really interesting options, like Tony Garcia, more of a defensive midfielder, he's just coming back off of injury. I don't think that's going to happen no matter what.
Mhm.
Steve Louis Jean, who the Next Pro broadcasters are fond of calling Steve Louis Jean. I don't think that's happening either. Diego Abarca just got here from El Paso.
Right. Yeah.
He literally just got here, but he started his first game after signing with the Next Pro team. I think he'll definitely play for the Next Pro side this weekend. I don't think he's getting called
Mhm.
up. Bobosi Biaruhanga, got a national team call up of his own, very talented player. But if I don't hear the player's name out of Josh Wolff's mouth, he's got his file cards of press conference answers, and he is incredibly predictable. One of the things that those most critical of him like to bring up is, oh, here we go. Wolf's going to do this again, to the point that he did a triple sub in a game earlier this year. And lots of people, myself included, were like, whoa, 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 wait. Is he okay? Is Josh sick? What's happening? Because Josh Wolff
Yeah.
doesn't do that. I feel like we could have that surprise, hey, this is great, celebratory thing for Alonso Ramirez. Because when I talked to Brett Utley after the North Texas game in Arlington at the disused apocalyptic husk of the ballpark in Arlington, as
Right.
I will always refer to it, he
Sketchy.
had he had a similar kind of wistful thing in his voice, the way that
Mhm.
he was that he had previously talked to me about Irvin Torres getting first team attention. And he said,
Mhm.
"Look, I'm gonna get emotional here because I'm just so happy for these guys because they have really been doing the
Mhm.
work, and part of what this league and what this team is for is development into the first team. I would say my money is on one or two, one of the two of them, and maybe Alonso is on the bench, and so is Irvin,
Mhm.
with the intent of not actually playing Irvin, but just having him there as additional midfield depth, because they're fine along the defensive line, even though they're missing Julio. I don't think they need to call up one of their defenders. I don't think we're going to see Sal Mazzaferro called up. I don't think we're going to see Tony from his restaurant franchise chain, his
Yeah.
other buddy from the back line. I
Mhm.
don't see that. I think midfield is where they do something with call ups, or in the case of
Mhm.
Alonso, maybe he goes ahead and gets that supplemental spot.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that'd be interesting if that happened. I mean, obviously Burton's the easiest one because he's already on a supplemental as a
Exactly.
homegrown. But yeah, his play, I would agree, is probably not up to what Josh Wolff is wanting. So, and again, maybe this is just a smokescreen. Maybe just Josh is having a lark and there's not going to be any call-ups at all, and it's going to be 18 or 19 people, including all three goalkeepers, that will be making the trip up to Kansas City. But it's kind of fun to speculate about. And again, yeah, I mean the whole Torres speculation I think is interesting. I mean, I think he is certainly a player who could slot in. The one thing too about Burton is I'm figuring that if he does actually get a first team call up, if he earns it to the point where he's going to get subbed in, I kind of feel like they would want to reserve that kind of first appearance for a home match, just to have all the pomp and circumstance around it
Yeah.
like that. I don't know that they would necessarily say, "Oh yeah, hey, here's a stadium in Kansas City, go knock them dead," but maybe. I mean, again, a lot of it is about pragmatism and necessity. I don't think Wolff would necessarily, if Burton was up to it and it was the 85th minute and they needed him in as a late game sub, I don't think he would necessarily
Yeah.
hesitate to pull that trigger. I mean, certainly I had asked about activating Ramirez in the second half of the Minnesota game, figuring, oh, well, maybe they could have used him. They were already up a man. It seemed like they could have maybe locked this game down. But Wolff seemed to think that Ramirez was in there. They were trying to win the game and put him in there with that in mind, and seemed pretty pleased with Ramirez's performance. And yeah, you could argue that he did help.
On the note of the team choosing the right time to do the right thing, I think you're right with Micah. There
Mhm.
is definitely something that they want that first true homegrown debut thing to be a special thing. And I think that's
Mhm.
part of why they're letting him cook longer and not rushing him to first team minutes. And, I'll go ahead and make mention of the nepotism word. For all of
Okay.
the claims of nepotism toward Josh Wolff, they sure didn't save it for something special and give Gavin Wolff his first pro appearance in a shiny, flashy opportunity. They put him in against RSL2, aka Real Monarchs, in what was a drubbing almost as bad as what the first team went through the day before. There are things that a club wants to make special and put pomp and circumstance around. And there are other things where as much preferential treatment as the Wolff boys are alleged to get from their dads. Look at Owen bouncing around wherever he's being told to play. He's not exactly getting
Mhm.
to pick his spot.
No, no. Yeah, another discussion another time. But just kind of feelings about this match in general. Like, are you optimistic that they're going to get their third result to close out June, or do you think that the combination of road and person being fired bounce, not necessarily a new coach bounce, and just again the continued thin roster blues that Austin has, will maybe result in SKC getting some sort of result, dare we
I'm
say it, a win against Austin?
I'm feeling an Austin road win. There's a
Hmm.
large contingent of traveling fans going. That always bodes well. This
Yep.
team performs really well when the traveling fans show up in the kinds of numbers that I am aware are traveling for this one. Likewise, the Scared Money Derby for the second team the next day against SKC2 and Benny Feilhaber, I think they stand a pretty good chance. And the second team has been in not the best of shape this whole season.
Hmm.
I think this is going to be a solid weekend for Austin. And even though, like, it's not like having the coach fired, but having that guy fired, that does something to players' heads about, well, what's the shape of this team going to look like, and do I fit into it, and do I need to get ready to get traded into the USL Championship or shipped off to the championship underneath the Premier League, and then find out that Blackburn Rovers forgot to finish my paperwork and
Yeah.
then head back to Kansas City.
They had
I
save instead of send.
Yeah, I think Austin is looking favorable for a result this weekend.
Mhm.
Against Kansas City, I think they're in about as good of a place as they could be, considering the roster issues, considering people being worn out, Driussi coming back from tummy troubles. I think is
Mhm.
what has been rumored.
Yep, indeed. Yeah, we asked Wolff about that after the game and thought it was a virus, and rather than saying yes, he just said it's in that space. So
It's in that
that was
space.
cryptic. Could you please make it more cryptic? I don't need a yes and no. I need equivocation. If you could deliver that for me, that would be great. That way I could speculate and not know for sure. So that would be a thing that I would like to do. All right. Anything else we need to hit before we send it off into a journey up north to Kansas City? Again, kind of one of the most confounding stadiums that I've
Yeah.
ever been to. I mean, obviously as a soccer venue, it is good. They have a strong fan base. They get loud. Their press box is nice. Getting any kind of ride share back out of that stadium at 11 o'clock on a Saturday night is nigh impossible, or at least it was during the COVID era when I was going to some games and covering things there. Yeah, it's remote. There's a Speedway kind of next door, and there's an Applebee's, and that stays open until I think 10, right? So there's like a Nebraska Furniture Mart, and there's not a lot of what you would call culture or anything that, there are no like nightclubs that say Cristiano Ronaldo would want to go to
Yeah,
after a hard fought MLS match against, Real Salt Lake or the Chicago Fire or something like that.
I've not been there, but what you're describing reminds me of the desolation surrounding the Frisco Stadium, where
Mhm.
there's a bunch of stuff
It's
happening
similar.
in there, and there's not a whole lot happening around it. Well, I
Yeah.
guess the one thing that we could touch on is, the thing that probably had us the most furious about how cacophonous and crazy it was in the Continental Club, because it was difficult to hear and understand and follow a train of thought. But for the second time in my experience, Roto did a kind of come hang out with me, in the back room at the cigar club. And let me tell you these amazing deals that I got. And let me tell you how hard my
Yeah.
job is and how great I am at it, kind of
Yeah.
thing.
This is, by the
Where,
way, the thing we were alluding to about a half hour
uh-huh.
ago that we
Yeah,
kind
like
of dropped for.
after some press conference or another, he just like pulled me aside unprompted and was bragging to me about how great it was that he had landed Rubio the way that he did. And I mean, he was out of contract, so it's not like he did something of the crazy blah blah blah. I worked out this thing, but I think it was more that he was just really happy before he knew we all had word of how much he was making. He was just thrilled that he got a player that he saw of such great utility for the salary that he locked him in at for as long as he locked that in. And I was like, okay, well, the cool thing to brag about. And I had thought that it had already been officially out there. And I went, oh, okay. So he will occasionally he'll pull you aside like your Tio who wants you to know that he got an insane deal off of this car with very low mileage. That's in incredible
Yeah,
shape. It's like the
that
dealer drive
was
around one.
yeah, that was kind of the vibe, and it shifted to mostly Spanish. And of course, I'm at the Duolingo portion where I am struggling with the difference between Ser and Ester, so I am not terribly helpful in that department. I was catching stray words here and there, but then he would kind of bounce back into English at some points. But yeah, there was kind of some interesting information that was shared amidst, again, the cacophony of what happened. It had kind of, I guess we'd gotten kind of used to it at that point. I was able to hear him a little bit more clearly than when the actual press conference stuff was going on. But so he shared some news about some of the dealings and all that. And he was in particular bragging about Dessler. What was he, if you want to just kind of share what he was saying to you? Because then he popped back and he said it so we could kind of all understand it, but there
Yeah,
was
well,
some build up to that.
I just asked him how soon's Dessler going to get here, and he said, "Oh, it was supposed to be yesterday, but paperwork stuff."
Hmm.
And I'm still unclear whether he was necessarily talking about Dessler or he was talking about Svatok. And I think he was actually talking about Svatok because it was
Yeah.
about the deal was supposed to happen back in November. It was kind of marbling together multiple different trains of thought because
Yeah.
there were different identifiers. So one identifier where I was trying to follow his train of thought in all of the noise was he was talking about 10 million euros versus 7 million euros, which was the Bukari deal.
Yep.
Bukari. See, now you got me. I'm saying it wrong now. So Usman's deal, there was interest from LA Galaxy. There was interest from Chicago Fire, and it was in the 10 million euro range.
Right. And that was stuff that was reported before.
Yeah, that was stuff that was reported before. And so the thing that hadn't been figured out was, well, then how did Austin get him for 7? How did that happen? And it straight up came down to the fact that by the time the winter window closed, and he was worth that because Red Star was in Champions League and that bid up the price, and then the window closed. And once the window closed, LA and Chicago were looking at other stuff, and so he was able to make the deal happen at the wage number that it is. And
I think he was also saying that the value dipped a little bit because Red Star didn't make it out of group stage.
Right. That was it. Was the deal was valued at 10 million because it looked like they might make it out, and then they didn't, and simultaneously the window closes. And so, okay, well, 10 million is not the price. And at the same time, that because of the European schedule, maybe the guy doesn't want to move right in the middle of the season anyway. So it could be that the conversation was, okay, well, this is the price. And it's like, well, if that's the price now, yeah, great, we get it. Let's not uproot him in the middle of the European season, and let's keep talking and let's figure something out. And so it became a thing of, okay, all right, well, we're going to have to wait till July. But imagine if this club had gotten Bukari at the beginning of the MLS season. Imagine if that had happened, and how differently we would be looking at things, where you got Obrian on one side, you got Bukari on the other side from February. That's an interesting alternate reality. We've been talking a lot about alternate realities today. That is an interesting alternate reality I would have liked to see.
Of course, though, in that case, you probably do at that point have to buy Ring down in order to allow Bukari to get there. And then there's also kind of this weird log jam, and then Rigoni is still there, but then maybe
they
there's
buy
more aggressive
Rigoni
trading. Or maybe that agent realizes, Austin already has Rigoni's replacement. Maybe I should take one of these 2 exit ramps that Roto is offering, rather than whatever kinds of machinations he was trying to
Good
work.
point.
Yeah.
Good
No,
point.
that's really interesting. Yeah, but the Dessler stuff I thought was really interesting too, because he's the only one of the 3 that
He came
on a free, because his contract technically with Toulouse ends June 30th. So I don't think he can come in till after the 30th, unless he's got special dispensation from Toulouse to get loose. But then he was saying something which sounded like
he said
getting
a
scoop several months ahead of MLSPA Christmas to find out what Dessler is going to be making.
Well, he said Dessler was supposed to be there the day before the Continental Club event. So
that was Dessler. That was his spot.
I specifically asked about Dessler. I was like, so when's Dessler getting here? And he was like, well, it was supposed to be yesterday, but paperwork.
Oh, that's
interesting. And it could be that paperwork was immigration paperwork. It could be paperwork was technically he can't actually be here until after June 30th. So we got him a later flight. But then the wage side of things is where things got interesting, because the number 400K was mentioned. And if that's what he got this player on a free, like Roto's used car lot is doing some business, dude. If that's what he got this guy on, good for him. Like that is the kind of savvy wage moves, like with Osman, like having to buy down Ring or go ahead and move Rigoni in the winter, like those kinds of things being in the mix. I have a feeling that all of the different GAM jujitsu that he has been doing was so that he had the flexibility to buy Ring down if he had to buy Ring down and make the DP space that way. And he was ready to exercise the buyout on Rigoni, I'm sure, as soon as he arrived last summer. I feel like everything we have seen validates the notion that he was planning on buying him out as a matter of when. And if it was able to be made smoother, then that's great. But like back to Dessler, this is that other angle of things of let's identify these players who are very talented players who, as Austin, I've referred to them as often being looked at as spare parts FC, where they pick up Maxi or Rudy, they pick up various players that have bounced around, that have been at different places. You know, Brad Stuver, who was a sub goalie, and now he is one of the top starting goalies in the whole league. This has been a pattern for how Austin has found their way into success, and Borrell is that on steroids. No implications to doping to be made, but just the amping up the team's game in that respect is something that people make these meme images of him looking hungry for gam, and that's how the dude operates.
Yeah. So not actual steroids to clarify.
Not actual steroids,
but
budget steroids.
Yeah. The thing with Dessler is I kind of figured based on his profile, based on his kind of level of play, who he was, where he's coming from, all that, I figured, TAM player, 600, 700K. And again, we'll clarify that in September with the MLSPA Christmas next edition that's going to come out. But if he's making just 400 and there's not TAM, that means that there's the potential, if roster spots open up, to get other players as well. And again, maybe it's a graduated contract. We don't know that necessarily, but maybe there's a kind of strategic reason that he's on that number, or maybe he's just flexing. But Roto did, in the context of saying 400,000, seem fairly proud of that number.
He's and rightfully so. And again, it's kind of like his bragging about what he was paying Rubio. And, would another team have been able to do that? Sure, if another team had actually wanted him. And that's the thing, is he's got guys like Rubio in on deals that are like, prove yourself, prove your worth, and this will be a very good environment for you and your dozen kids to either sail off into retirement or, overall just, work out the last act of your career. And in the case of Dessler, he's a player who may be here for, a couple years or something like that, boosts his value back up, goes back to Europe, maybe, or he proves himself here. Other really weird deals get off the books, and it's possible to reward him coming in at a lower wage spend by moving him up. And keeping in mind that if this league is going to play Leagues Cup the same year that there is a World Cup, I think there's a little bit of hedging on Borrell's part, that more roster stuff is going to open up and make it easier to hang on to these guys, that if Dessler comes in and absolutely kills it and there is a need to up the wage spend on him, he is banking on being able to do that. And if he has the easy way to do that, sure. He seems like a very easy way and hard way guy, and he figures out a way to get both things done, because at the end of the day, he has his goal in mind and he's going to get that.
So where do you greet Dessler then? Where do you put the welcome party? Do you use Unbelievable or the Parish? Something maybe on Rainy Street?
Midnight Cowboy, the speakeasy styled bar owned by Tim League.
Sure.
Good vibes. Very noisy.
Oh yeah, he was wearing a cowboy hat in that photo that we saw of him recently.
Yeah, I think there we go. They tipped their hand.
Wait, it's Lonesome Cowboy, right? It's not Midnight. Midnight Cowboy is...
No, it's Midnight Cowboy. Midnight Cowboy Modeling Club.
Oh dear, really?
Yep, sure is. That's the name of the very special massage parlor whose space that bar moved into. It's part of the whole story.
There's a reason I've been avoiding downtown.
Look, you're missing out on a good time, Phil. That's all I'm saying.
Am I? Am I really?
The drinks are amazing. The vibes are immaculate.
Okay. All right. Okay.
It is no longer a special massage parlor. It's just, tongue-in-cheek styled after the one that it replaced.
And that was your Austin history moment for today. Is there anything else that we need to tackle before we get out of here?
No.
It's obviously very, very organized edition of Emergency Podcast.
Just trying to hang on to that clean rating in the Apple Podcast, Phil. That's all I'm trying to do now.
Right. Wasn't Midnight Cowboy also a famously X-rated movie that was actually Oscar?
Yeah, John Voight and Dustin Hoffman.
Mm-hmm. From the dusty recesses of my Trivial Pursuit worthy knowledge.
It's all about
I have
cinema history here on Emergency
Oh.
Podcast.
all about that and appreciation of various Austin spaces, wherever they might be. All right. That brings us to the end of a well-organized and well-executed emergency podcast. Thank you all for being here. We will see you next week with more Austin FC emergencies.
Where's Phil? He usually starts this off.
He's teaching in San Antonio today. Colby, go ahead and start us off.